So hi everyone, I'm Martina Al-Khalil from Biomax. So we're a contract research organization, and we also do consultancy in terms of medical and pharmaceutical domain, like registries, quality and medical or surveys as well. So today we're going to present the registry, understanding the need for this registry, what is the solution that we are proposing mainly, how we are going to manage this registry from kickoff until the final results. Also, we will be going through lessons learned for a successful registry to be obtained. So if you want to understand the request, basically the registry is aiming in collecting retrospective and prospective data. It's real-world data. This is coming from your practice, from your patients, about all the patients diagnosed with the disease and receiving the treatments in the GCC country. So this registry will be able to gather these data and at the end extracting the data to do the analysis, reports, and publication to be submitted in journals. So to do this, we are using a software company that will allow us to have the platform, an online electronic database that will allow us to collect this data. The software company is Decima Software. It's a Canadian company that has a long experience, over 15 years of experience in setting up databases for clinical trials, for registries, for PROs, and other kind of online platforms that require data collection. So the solution is an online solution that can be accessible by any person worldwide using a web browser. It allows us to enter data in a platform that we design ourselves based on the project, of course. What they provide us is the platform, the base to be able to design this platform. We can also collect data related to PROs. For example, if you want patients to answer questions, they can do this online, or you have to collect the data and enter them in the database. So there are different kind of course, databases that are available. I'm sorry, it moves from the. It's a FDA 21 part CFR compliant solution, so it is compliant with the FDA. So they have a big experience in the registry world. One of the biggest registries they have is the one with 160,000 patients, with 1,200 sites and 10,000 users. As an example for registry, also they did a big one in rheumatology in USA and Canada. So they do have big data available and the database that can handle big data. Here are some examples of how the database looks like. It's a simple database that you can enter and find online. You can find the images that can be uploaded on the system. For example, in rheumatology, you can have the person to identify the joints, for example, so swollen joints directly on the system to avoid doing different data entry. So it's one data entry on the system for easy access. So in terms of data privacy and confidentiality, this solution is compliant with the international regulatory confidentiality rules. We can cite the FDA one, the Canadian compliance in terms of data confidentiality, one of the most difficult data confidentiality worldwide, which is the EU GDPR, as well as for clinical trials, of course, the GCC compliant. They are compliant with the HIPAA from the USA. All this is to protect the data. And the database is password protected, it's encrypted, and the transfer is also done in an encrypted way to avoid any data loss or any data breach. So in every master service agreement that is signed with Decima, there is a clause that clearly identifies that the data is owned by the customer, the sponsor, whoever is providing the data owns this data. They do not have the right either to use it or to access the data without the approval from the person that owns the data. Their servers are hosted in Canada on secure servers and in a big data center for them, and they are certified ISO 27001. This is the ISO for security. You can have an option with them in hosting the data in other servers, for example, Amazon server or Google server, but this is totally a different solution that they can propose. But of course, all will differ in terms of cost or where to host it and so on. But this is also possible if you wish to. In their data privacy and personal data protection policy, they show how they abide by the international data privacy rules and the 10 principles of the Canadian data privacy, which is the accountability. So the company is accountable for protecting the data. So this is clearly stated in their policy. The principle two is the identifying purposes. So why are we collecting the data? We cannot collect any kind of data if there is no purpose behind it, if there is not a reason for analyzing the data. Consenting, any patient providing his data has to consent to provide it. Limiting collection, we are not allowed to collect any kind of data if we are not going to use it in the analysis for a certain purpose. Limiting use, disclosure, and retention. As you know, in the international guidelines for data privacy, we are not allowed to keep the data for indefinite time, unless this is clearly stated for a certain reason. So we have to show how much time we are retaining the data, after that, how it is destroyed or how it is kept, and so on. So we have to show all these from the beginning. Accuracy, the data that is collected should be accurate. Safeguards, which means that the company shows the level of security required to protect the data. Openness, so whenever you want to ask any question about data privacy and data security, they have to show you this. Individual access, whenever a patient wants to stop using his data or wants to access his data or limit the usage, he has the total right to do so. By saying this, we can delete all the data from the system and we cannot leave any trace about it. So this is the right of any patient to do so. And challenging compliance, the company has a person who is a data privacy officer to challenge, so any patient can challenge them on the access to their data. Okay, so for the registry here, we have established some examples of variables that we think can be part of the registry. However, whenever the project is really kicked off, of course, there will be an exchange with you to tell us what are the variables that are needed, based, of course, on literature review, and we can discuss this. But by experience of what we have and examples of variables, we can divide them in different sections. First one is about patients and patient characteristics. This section will allow us to collect data about the gender, date of birth, education level, who is the physician, the vital signs, how the patient was diagnosed, the health insurance information. All these will allow us later on in the analysis to define the population, so the population characteristics and definition, and it will allow us later on, whenever it's needed, to do a correlation between variables related to the patient characteristic and to the disease, for example. It could be for health policy purposes, it could be for disease management purposes. So these are really to define the population. The second kind of data are related more to the medical history, what kind of diseases the patient has, the history of the disease itself, any other concomitant diseases, cancers, non-malignant chronic diseases. So the full history of the patient is defined in this section. Then we can talk about the clinical status at diagnosis, when the patient was diagnosed, how he was diagnosed, by whom, since when, and what are the specific disease characteristics for this patient. We can also talk about the treatment, the initial treatment, how the journey of the treatment was done, and the current treatment, the side effects, the dosage, so all what is related really to treat the disease itself. What is the outcome of this treatment, if the drug was changed, when it was changed, what was the reason for changing it, what are the results of the lab test, for example. So all the history and the current treatment status. And all until this section, we can consider that this information are collected at the first visit. So the big bulk of data is collected mainly at the first visit. Following that, the follow-up visits are more light pages. It's most of the time 1 or 2 pages, collecting very slight information coming from your practice, from your medical practice. We're not in a clinical trial, so we're not imposing you any kind of variable. We put the maximum and you just complete what you have in your practice. But the better we have more information, the better will be for the analysis. So whenever you have data available, it's better to collect it in the data. So how we will be doing the project management of this project? I will skip here, so we introduced ourselves and what we do exactly. So we can handle the study from A to Z. So we work based on a quality management system that is established as per the international regulation. We use project management tools to be very agile, not to complicate things, and to manage the project in the most efficient way. We use continuous reporting, so you know how many patients we have in the database in real time, how many data are completed, how many are missing, and so on. And we use, as we mentioned, validated computerized system like the GAACI platform, which is validated versus the international regulations. So this is a brief view of how the flow of the projects are done. First of all, we start by designing the registry. We design the protocol, the variables, the electronic platform for the data collection. We do the development of the platform itself, the online one. Then we have to do the regulatory approval, submit to the ethics committee to get the approvals. The deployment, which is the training of the doctors and the users who will be completing. And we, throughout the project, whenever you are recruiting patients, we monitor the data to make sure that the data is clean and complete and there is no issue, to avoid later on delays in the data analysis, to make sure that the database is clean from the beginning. And finally, we do the analysis and the report. For the analysis, we use a software that is also FDA approved, which is the SAS software for statistical analysis, because it allows us also to do correlation and programming of more advanced statistical programs. So here, whenever we want to do this analysis, we go to what we call a database log. So we stop the data, the data entry, we clean the data, we make sure that the variables that are entered are clean and can be analyzed. We do the analysis, and then we issue the statistical report, which is a big report with tables, figures, and all the, if you want, the mathematical values. After that, we do the medical report and the manuscript for publication. We estimate to do this once per year to have enough data that can be analyzed, because I assume in a few months we don't have a bulk of data that can be analyzed. So the project team will be mainly with a project manager, with medical writers, biostatisticians, data manager, all under the supervision of quality assurance. And we have the IT platform, which is the GAACI company, with their IT team to develop the solution. What will be our responsibilities in the project? First of all, for the database, we will design it, create it, maintain it, and make sure that we manage it in a good way. The management of the project overall, so we will be following up with third parties, for example, the platform owner, with the IRBs, the regulatory to get the approvals. We will be training and following up with the doctors who will be doing the data entry, and of course, the statistical analysis and the reporting. As doctors, what would be your responsibility? Of course, recruitment of patients, data entry, review of data if there is any issue. Here, what we mean by review of data, for example, when we review the data ourselves, when we monitor it, and we find there is a discrepancy, we have to issue queries to correct this data, to make the data all the same way for analysis. So we might get back to you, asking you if the value is normal, if the unit is used as we wanted, and so on. Participate in the review of results later on for the publication, and support in regulatory process. For example, if we need a letter to be signed to submit to IRBs, we might ask you for this, and attend trainings and meetings whenever it's. Now, what are the key points for a successful registry? A registry provides highly reliable data, because it's data that is coming from real world, from your practice. So it has evolved to reflect disease prevention. So the more we know about the disease, the more we know how to prevent it. Early diagnosis and screening programs, which Ahmed was talking about. So you want the underdiagnosed to be more reflected. Treatment response, we understand more the reaction of the patient toward the treatment. Healthcare planning, decision-making, because this will help you to make decision in regards of treatment. You can escalate this in publication that will be read by the authorities as well for all public health issues. And disease control programs for regulatory. Implementing, maintaining, and running a medical registry requires substantial effort. And to develop the registry, it represents a complex task. It needs collaborative and consistent teamwork. Actually, it's a teamwork between the third parties and the doctors, because you are the key point in this registry. You are providing the data. So this is very important to have this collaboration between us. So basically, how we can read to this. First of all, with on-time data entry. We understand the load that you have when your patient is at the clinic, and you might not be able to directly do the data entry on the system. However, you can do it on paper and then enter it in the system. But it's better to have it as close to the visit as possible to have reliable data. Completion of all available data. As mentioned, is in some practices, you might not collect all the information needed, but whatever you have, it's better to enter it into database to have a very consistent information. Respect of data entry guidelines in terms of, for example, units, values of the lab test, for example, in what unit are you representing it? And finally, engagement. This is just to see that the registry is really here to help you understand more the disease, understand more how to treat your patients, how to understand the disease. So it's more a mindset. It's not like a homework you are coming to do. It's more a mindset to help understand more the disease in your respective countries. Here it's a projection on how we can imagine the steps and the tentative timelines. Of course, all these will change depending on how quick things will go. But let's consider we have a kickoff, an official one in May 2023, which is the kickoff of the project. Here we can, in parallel, finalize the variables with you. We decide on the final variables that we will be adding, and we develop the protocol and the consent form. These are important for two reasons. The first one, the variables will help us to do the database, because once it's done, we cannot change it. And then the protocol and the ICF to submit to regulatory authorities and to IRB submissions to be able to get the approval. If we estimate doing this in June, we estimate having approval starting October, for example, and here we can start doing the training on the database, how the data should be entered. And for aiming for a patient recruitment in January 2024. Throughout year 2024, the recruitment can be done, and in parallel, we will be doing the data review and the data cleaning, aiming to have in Q1 2025 the first report with the data that has been gathered throughout the year.